From the International Criminal Court have interviewed staff from Gaza's two biggest hospitals, according to Reuters, in what's being described as the first confirmation that ICC investigators are speaking to medics about possible war crimes committed by Israel in Gaza. Palestinian officials have demanded investigations after hundreds of bodies were exhumed in mass graves at Nasser and Shifa Hospital following Israeli raids on the medical centers. On Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to news the ICC may be close to issuing arrest warrants for him and other Israeli officials.
The International Criminal Court in The Hague is contemplating issuing arrest warrants against senior Israeli government and military officials as war criminals. This would be an outrage of historic proportions.
Reid, can you first talk about this possibility that Prime Minister Netanyahu and others may be charged by the International Criminal Court, and the U.S. saying that the International Criminal Court doesn't have the jurisdiction to do this?
No international tribunal has issued an arrest warrant for a Western official. For decades, we've had this double standard where international justice has only been effective for crimes committed by leaders of developing countries or by enemies of the U.S., like Vladimir Putin. You know, the Palestinians have been fighting for 15 years to bring the ICC's attention to alleged Israeli war crimes. Back in, including illegal settlements in the West Bank. And the ICC, under 3 successive prosecutors, has given this slow walk to those complaints. And it was always assumed that this prosecutor, Karim Khan, a British barrister who came in with American support, was very reticent, would never actually cross that red line and indict an Israeli official. But I think the overwhelming evidence of atrocities, the disproportionate attacks, the indiscriminate attacks, the collective punishment of the people of Gaza, the international condemnation, and frankly also the genocide case brought by South Africa at the other court in The Hague, the ICJ, that resulted in a ruling by the ICJ essentially that Israel had a case to answer. These have all made it untenable now for the ICC not to act. Now, of course, the U.S. position, as you've said, is that the ICC does not have jurisdiction because Israel has not ratified the ICC treaty. This is the historic position that the U.S. argued 25 years ago when we were drafting the ICC statute in Rome. But the U.S. was overwhelmingly outvoted, and the ICC has jurisdiction over nationals of countries that have ratified, so-called state parties, but also it has jurisdiction over crimes committed on the territory of states that have given authorization. And so, but we saw under the previous ICC prosecutor when she opened investigations into Afghanistan that potentially implicated American war crimes, when she finally opened an investigation into Israel-Palestine, that the Trump administration sanctioned the ICC for its temerity in investigating acts by officials of non-state parties. And even when those sanctions were lifted by the Biden administration, the U.S. said, we don't believe the ICC has jurisdiction over nationals of non-state parties. But then Russia invaded Ukraine. And of course, Russia is also a non-state party. And when the ICC began to investigate Russia and issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, the U.S. celebrated that. So it's now for the U.S. to go back and say, well, we loved it when you did it with Putin, but we think you're crossing a red line when you do it with Israel. Of course, that's just hypocrisy.
Reid, I wanted to ask you, one of the Israeli officials who spoke to the New York Times said that the possibility of the court issuing arrest warrants has been guiding Israeli decision-making in recent weeks. What's the significance of this?
Well, it shows, actually, that Israel is worried about this. Obviously, they can't undo crimes that have already been committed, but many people say, well, you know, what's the big deal? I mean, in fact, the ICC in 20 years has never actually got its hands on, prosecuted, and convicted any state official anywhere. But the fact is that if the ICC issues this arrest warrant, of course, it represents, first of all, a profound moral rebuke for Israeli actions. It makes it impossible for people to say that Israel's actions comport with the law. It also means that Benjamin Netanyahu could never, if he's one of the people indicted, could never travel to an ICC state party for the rest of his life. He could never go to Europe. But it also, it also suggests that ultimately any Israeli official involved in these kinds of activities down the line could potentially also be subject to an ICC investigation and indictment. So it really, hopefully, would have not only a protective effect on the past, but a dissuasive effect on Israel's actions in the future.